Interest rates vary between 21% and 50%.
With that,
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome today to the council officers for today's meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get going with council procedure and meeting procedure, today, 83 years ago,
and there's obviously more than 6 people here.
was a day that will go down in history.
That's not very good for a community meeting.
Our former mayor and former councillor from back in the 80s, Councillor Ken Clark, was born. So today it's his birthday. I'd like to give him 3 cheers. Hip hip. Hip hip. Hip hip. Happy birthday, Councillor Clark.
He's 11.
And Megan, I hear it's your birthday today too, is it? Well, happy birthday to you as well. Congratulations on your 30th, is it? Yeah, well done, Megan. I didn't embarrass you, not at all. Not at all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get underway. So, ladies and gentlemen, under Clause 91.4 of the Governance and Meeting Conduct Local Law provides the following: that this public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligations, and as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. I'll just do an acknowledgement of our traditional owners here. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which we are meeting, including the Bangarang people. We pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to the elders of other communities who may not be with us here today. Would we stand for the opening prayer if you wish? Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people on whom we serve. Amen. Amen. Before we get underway, ladies and gentlemen, there are a number of items that will come up for discussion here tonight, and we respect that you may have some questions on this. I will state this as question time and not statement time. If you have a question relating to each of the matters as we go through, please come forward, press the button with the little man that's talking on it, and ask your question out loud. We also respect that at the end there is a general question time if you would like to ask councillors or management staff here any questions on any issue at council, and we give you 2 questions for that end question time. So we look forward to your questions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, just going through our meeting structure, and obviously all us councillors are here at present, and there is no acceptance of granting a leave of absence from any councillors for our next meeting on August the 20th. There's no citizenship sharing, and I'll just go over the confirmation of our previous minutes. Councillor Clark and Councillor Benton will move that and second that. Does anyone in the public have any questions on our previous minutes from last meeting? On that case, all those in favour? The motion is moved to accept that. Now, councillor reports. We're going to have a presentation of reports. Now, just quickly, I will mention that I would like to congratulate one of our councillors, seems to be an acknowledgement of councillors today. Congratulate Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Fitzpatrick will be embarking on a 12-month advanced leadership program that she was selected for with Women and Leadership in Australia. This program is dedicated to developing female leaders and supporting the increased presence of women in business and community leadership roles. She will be the youngest participant in the program to date, which is very exciting, and that should be acknowledged. So congratulations, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Okay, we'll move straight down to item 12, which is executive service. There are none. 13, corporate services. 13.1, community satisfaction survey. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Maurice. So 13.1, community satisfaction survey results. This is a survey that's undertaken with the local government for all of the Victorian councils to assess our community satisfaction, help us to understand which of those services we provide that are most important to our community and how you view that we are performing. And the results are attached in the report. So the recommendation is that Council notes the results of the 2019 Community Satisfaction Survey.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions from the gallery on that, please? Please, Mr. Fox, come forward.
When you've got a shaky hand, one push is two.
I thank you. Brendan and Mr. Mayor, if I had a report like this on my donuts at my bakery, we would close the place for a week and have a revamp of what we were doing wrong. Not one of these, and I presume it doesn't say, but not one of these percentages gets near 100. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. We'll move forward. Sorry, did you? Well, question. Councillor Curry.
I'd just like to say one thing. This is not a bakery. This is a complex business, an extremely complex business. The results take into a huge amount of people. We're not selling sugar here. We are actually doing a very good job, and when you look at the stats, they're actually quite good. So don't compare us to a donut shop. Don't compare us to a bakery. Compare us against what we're actually doing. If you have a look at the results against the norm, then we're doing a very good job.
Really?
Can
I respond to that, Mr. Mayor?
No, it's not a question. You didn't have a question, Mr. Fox. You made a statement, and Mr. Curry, Councillor Curry is making a statement, so we'll move forward. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Well, in that case, someone like to... Yes.
My name is Judy Stevenson. A couple of, well, probably 12 months ago now, I came around a dark corner and nearly hit a family with a pusher and a child on a push bike because they had to walk on the road with the pram because there were no footpaths in that area. This is referred to as the Bronx near Rangeview Avenue. I don't live in that area, I was visiting someone else. But that concerns me, that people with prams, people that are disabled with wheelie walkers, people that are disabled with their remote controlled vehicles, I'm wondering what the council's going to do about upgrading and putting in footpaths for everyone that accesses our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. I'll refer that question to the end of our meeting there tonight. Alan, if you could just take note of that, we'll refer that to our public question time at the end, general questions. Can I have a mover for the community satisfaction and survey results? Councillor Dave Fuller and seconded by Councillor Fitzpatrick. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Loan borrowings, 13.2. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank Thank you again. So loan borrowings for the 2019-20 years. So this report is essentially an administrative requirement that enables the CEO to authorise the organisation to borrow. So what it is an articulation of what's already in our budget that then gives the CEO that ability to execute the necessary documentation to undertake the borrowing that we've already set out in our budget for this year, and the recommendation is as per on the screen.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the gallery? Mr. Fox, please come forward.
Mr. Mayor, would you prefer to read that or will I?
One moment. Yes, Mr. Fox. Mr. Mayor, I may wish to ask a question on the loan 13.2 loan borrowing. Whilst in deep analysis of matters financial is not my forte, I would like further explanation on the following items. If we were to borrow $11 million guaranteed by the rate revenue, is that to mean that any further loan required by council will be either a second mortgage on a rate revenue and therefore the higher interest rate? By adopting this motion in relation to the local government finance vehicle, are we locking ourselves out of the commercial market in the competitive interest rate and charges logic? Given that interest rates are lower than I can remember in my lifetime, I'm curious why we should be talking about variable interest rate, and any lower seems unfeasible. Therefore, it would not be unreasonable to assume that the rate could double or triple in the life of the loan. Us older ones remember it at 17%. D, I note that the principal is to be repaid in 10 years' time with either cash or refinancing. In the document presented this evening, I do not see any opportunity for a structured payment of the principal. F, I have two primary concerns. First, is that in servicing this loan, the essential 3 R's that council are obligated to may not be fully achievable because of the lack of funds. Second is assets purchased with the loan may in fact have reached the end of the useful life before being paid for. And G, finally, if the items being purchased do not have sufficient value to support their own mortgage, then this seems to be little navel gazing would be in order. The main question here is, and so Mr. Mayor, I am asking that this item be withdrawn from tonight's agenda and reprogrammed for a special meeting of council. Thank you, Mr. Fox. We will put to the council the existing motion. If they want to continue that is up to them. So before we go any further, are there any other questions on this? Yes, I'll just let Brendan say a couple of words prior.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of comments, Brian. The first being that we were just handed this immediately before the meeting, so we haven't had very long to consider your multi-part statement and question here. So I'll do my best to cover at least some of the key elements off the cuff. The first thing I'd say is the borrowings are in line with our long-term financial plan. So we have both a 4-year financial plan that sits within each year's budget and a longer 10-year plan. And the borrowings that are proposed in this year's budget and previous year's budgets are in line with that plan, and that plan is regularly revised and kept current to take account of priorities that arise over time. Going back a number of years, council would typically take out 10-year borrowings on a fairly traditional interest and principal model at fixed rates. We're now redeeming most of those loans, and a number of them are at kind of 6.5% or 7%, so significantly higher than, as you point out, today's much more competitive borrowings. I think about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a review done by one of the accounting firms, Ernst & Young, that looked at our finances and our borrowing capacity, and they made a number of recommendations to council, which are now encapsulated in a borrowing strategy that is adopted by the council. And amongst those were a recommendation that we diversify our borrowing so that we move away from having only fixed interest and principal borrowings to having some interest only and some variable rates. So over the last couple of years, we've been implementing that strategy to diversify our borrowing portfolio in accordance with that strategy. The local government financing vehicle that's coordinated by the MAB has proven over the years to be very, very competitive. It essentially works on the basis of aggregating a number of councils' borrowing needs into much larger sums and therefore attracting much more competitive rates than we might individually get ourselves if we went to the market. So we would expect the final rate from that to be somewhere between 0.5% and 1% lower than we might otherwise get through normal commercial tendering processes. So we would expect the rates to be extremely competitive rather than locking us out of a competitive market as you suggest. So as for the final part of the question, I'll leave that to the councillors to determine.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the gallery in relation to this matter? No, in that case, I'll put the motion up.
I'd like to move the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, mover, and a seconder, Councillor Curry. Any discussion, Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to go to the next page of the agenda, if you could, where it talks about the background. No, the next page on the agenda.
This is only recommendations.
The recommendations.
So it won't have
Oh,
the
right.
report listed.
So in the background, it says that the 2018-19 budget adopted by council provides for loan funds totaling 9.418 million. These funds are to fund Crew Street reconstruction 1.7, and it says in the next line a hydrotherapy pool of 6 million. That should read aquatic centre, not the hydrotherapy pool. So just with that clarification as to what the $6 million is for. Thank you.
And in that includes the hydrotherapy pool in the aquatic centre?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Would anybody else, councillors, like to talk on this? No? In that case, I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour of accepting this? Looks like the motion is carried. Thank you. Jamie, Community Wellbeing, 14.1, Community Access and Inclusion Plan.
Thank you. This report's presented to Council tonight in regards to our Community Access and Inclusion Plan, which has been something that we've been working on for quite a while now in partnership with a number of our community members and our local networks and support. So it's been pulled together with great input from people who both have disabilities and people who also are carers and people who work specifically as service providers for people who have a disability. So our Community Access and Inclusion Plan covers 4 key themes that will cover a number of different objectives and have some quite detailed actions in there, and they are inclusion and participation, communication and engagement, civic leadership and attitudes, and accessible environments. So the recommendation before Council tonight is that Council endorses the draft Community Access and Inclusion Plan for 2019 to 2022 for public exhibition and invites submissions. And if no submissions are received for the plan, the Council adopts the draft Community Access and Inclusion Plan without further resolution.
Thank you, Jamie. Any questions from the gallery, please? Yes, Megan, come forward. Could you text something on your phone for me, Megan? You're out of battery. Oh, you turned it off so it doesn't go off. Yeah, fair enough. I'll have to kick you out then. No.
Oh my God, good. Go away, make a man.
Everything?
You fight for me.
Is everything that's for you?
Yeah.
So all this inclusion plan is very good for you.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment on that. So what they're doing, you feel is good, and you'll be involved in our community consultation with Jamie's team, etc., on this community inclusion plan to make sure that you're included safely in here. Yeah. Well, I think that's forward. Thank you. Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Megan, for your good comments there, and I'm sure Jamie will look forward to with the team of having you help out to make sure that we're included in this. Thank you. Yes, Jude.
I got inclusion, attitude and access. What was the other one?
The four themes. So there's inclusion and participation, communication and engagement, civic leadership and attitudes, and accessible environments.
Sorry, you're speaking too fast for me to write.
Oh.
I didn't get a printout and there was only 6 printed out and there's a lot more people here than 6.
Okay.
So community,
Sorry.
okay,
Excellent.
someone's handed me one.
Thanks, Jude.
Thanks.
Are there any further questions on this one here? Mr. Fox, please come forward.
Hey, I got it in one. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask Jamie, is she happy with the look of the Murphy Street footpath? Now, I've just come back from a month on the Gold Coast. Up there, all of the racks and the seats are bang up against the windows of the shops, and they're so easy for the shopkeepers to service the goods that they've got out on the street, and the footpath is clear for people to wander like that. Here in Murphy Street, if you look along at Flynn's Menswear, Judd's Menswear, wherever you go, we've got this barrier in the middle where we used to have 3 metres of footpath to wander about and have a conversation on. Now we've got 2 narrow pieces, and it is more difficult to walk up the street with the goods in the centre. So I'm asking you, are you happy with this change?
So this change supports people who have a visual impairment to use the wall as a point of navigation. So there's actually a really good reason for accessibility for that change, for the boundary of buildings to be a visual guide for people who have a visual impairment. So on that basis, yes, I am happy with the change.
Well, I'd like to say that how many people have got a visual impairment? How many people are depending on this? We can't have a minuscule percentage of the community dictating through yourself, how the street is to be arranged. I'm unhappy about it. The shopkeepers are unhappy.
The question was asked, and thank you for the question, and Jamie answered the question. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jamie. All done there? Can I have a mover and a seconder then? Thank you. Mover Ashley and seconder Councillor Curry. All those in favour? Sorry, Ashley, would you like to talk on this much?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate the Same but Different project that's been recognised nationally, winning the highly commended project at the National Awards for Local Government in the Access and Inclusion category. So the film stars are our local youth, and it promotes and celebrates the continuous contributions the people with a disability make to our community. And thank you, Tegan, for coming. He's one of our local stars in this. And also a shout out to Adrian Ward, who was behind the camera. So well done, guys. You should be really proud, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Great comment. Anybody else like to talk on this matter? Councillor Clark?
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification. I believe it was a government ruling that told us that we had to make access along the footpath for people with a disability. It's not something that we took on our own back to do. I think it was a government directive that we had to provide it in that way.
Brendan, would you?
Through the chair, the local law that governs this is a direct response to things like the Disability Discrimination Act and Human Rights Charters, and the methodology we use here is a pretty commonly accepted practice, certainly throughout Victoria. I can't comment on other states. Those are not state legislation though, so I would imagine it's fairly consistent in other states as well, and it is, as Jamie correctly pointed out, to help guide people with both visual impairments and various other forms of disabilities to have a clear path of passage using the very safe building line as a way to navigate their way through public areas.
Thank you, Brendan. David?
And from memory, submissions for the urban design framework brought this to the attention of everyone to contribute, and I don't believe we got any discouraging contributions in regards to this and the footpath trading laws that were attached in that document from memory. So it's been supported previously.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'll put the, Councillor Fitzpatrick, did you want to reply? Okay. I'll put the vote to the councillors. All those in favour of adopting this motion? The motion is carried. Jamie, 14.2.
Thank you. So this report is actually in reference to a petition that was tabled at the June council meeting in regards to the marketing and branding strategy. The recommendation in response to that petition is that council considers the petition in conjunction with the branding and marketing strategy that will come to the August ordinary council meeting. So that report will be presented next month for council to consider, and this petition, as well as all submissions, will be presented to council as part of that decision.
Thank you, Jamie. Any questions from the gallery? Yes, please.
Hi.
Oh, thank you. Could you just say your name, please?
Yeah, hi, thanks.
No, still not on? That's it? Got us, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jackie Coupe. Thanks very much for the information about the rebranding strategy. I was wondering as to why it was being deferred for another month. Wondering if you can enlighten us a little bit more as to why that would happen, or why it is happening. Also, next month when it is to be discussed, will we be privy to the outcome of the submissions? As in, will you let us know what the submissions said and how they are weighted? And also, is it possible to do a breakdown, please, of the costing for this proposed rebranding? So how much has been spent so far? How much will be spent for the logo? How much will be spent for rebranding the name. And yeah, I'd actually like to know how the rebranding's going to happen. Is that billboards in Melbourne? Is it a sign on the highway? A little bit more clarification about that would be great too. Sorry, I know there's 3 little questions there, but...
No, thanks, Jackie. Good question. Firstly, Jackie, most of this information with costings and stuff we sort of have gone through, and it is on the internet, but we can go over that again and will. So thank you for that. The main reason why council laws got together and decided that we didn't have enough time, we wanted to make sure that we heard from more community people to make sure that we were up to speed, especially with what community sentiment was around rebranding, changing logos, and the way that money was going to be spent that way. It was for us to show that we are listening. We don't want to make an uninformed decision in a month. We just thought that it needed more consideration and council more talk and some more options put forward from the community, which has been fantastic from the majority of the community. So thanks to that one. I'm trying to think of the third question there was
the breakdown of
the breakdown of where the money's going, signage, billboards, logos, bits and pieces. I'm sure Jamie, can you answer that one?
Yeah, so we have that, a lot of that information was in the previous council report as well, but it will be also included in the council report at August and is also available through the presentation that we did that is uploaded onto our website as well at our community information sessions. In terms of the breakdown of the submission, there will absolutely be a summary of the submissions in terms of how many people responded and the sentiment behind those submissions will be broken down as part of the council report.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Up the back. That's it. Great job. Yes, go.
Joan Comer. I'm just looking at the website and I noticed the meeting is going to be at 3 p.m. next month. Are you planning to change that to maybe later so people who work can attend? Because a lot of people work, so that's
good question.
It's a very important issue to the community. So.
Sure, it has been programmed for 3 o'clock just so we kept pushing to have more time. It just worked out to be on that same August date. Right. All I can tell you is we'll discuss at our briefing session on Monday and let the community know.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. Yeah, just before we come, was that your only question, Jackie?
Yeah.
Great. Oh, sorry. Joan Comer. Sorry, Joan, thank you. Just excuse me one moment. We'll let you know about that tonight, actually, Joan. So thank you. We'll get further down the our agenda here and just pop out and discuss it quickly and come back, make a stand. Thank you. Okay, were there any other questions from the gallery? Okay, so I'll put the motion. Does anyone want to move the motion? Thank you, Councillor Fuller, and a seconder. Councillor Benton. Would anybody like to talk on the motion? No, in that case, I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 16, Development Services, Stephen Swart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this item is about the draft Wangaratta Health Precinct Structure Plan, which was endorsed by Council for consultation in March this year. The goals of the plan are on page 24 of the agenda. They include things like providing specific direction as to where health and allied services activities are to be located in the precinct, meet the healthcare meet needs of the municipality and the broader region, economic and social benefits, creating a vision and feel for the area, improving access and connectivity in that area, and also demonstrating environmental sustainability. The purpose of this report is to report on submissions received while we were doing the consultation process, consider proposed changes due to those submissions, and those changes are outlined in attachment 1 to the report, and then to ask council to adopt the revised plan and to resolve to prepare a planning scheme amendment to implement the recommendations of the plan. Recommendations of the report are on the screen.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions from the gallery? Yes, Joe, please come forward. Again, Joe, could you please state your name and...
Thank you, Mayor Rees here. Joe O'Keefe, Wangaratta.
Can you overturn them?
It's the white button, Joe.
Oh, thank you, Megan.
It just helps out for the audio at home more so than anything, Joe, to have the microphone on.
Thank you. I understand that the public will have a bigger chance to comment at the subsequent town planning scheme amendment stage, but a couple of questions came to mind when I saw this on council's website for consultation. Why was the boundaries of the health precinct predetermined? Normally with survey and analysis you'd look at where your uses are and then you'd perhaps draw the boundary afterwards. But it says here, background, the health precinct is nominated as the area, and you know the area that it is, generally centred on the hospital. But if you walk up and down Docker Street, you meet doctors and nurses walking all the time to Gateway Health on this side of the railway. And that I think that's the second largest single employer apart from the hospital, with about 300 people. And to my knowledge, there's at least three, four, five, six other health providers that are located on the city side of the railway as well. So with the connectivity objective, which we've been told about, that there is a major pedestrian link with the Docker Street rail bridge, which is at risk with the Inland Rail. So it seems as though this has been I could be wrong, but it seems to have been predetermined just to take that out of the equation. Let's just look at the bit that we want to look at, where we'd like perhaps to see it, but without doing proper survey and analysis. So that's the first question, why was it predetermined? The second query is, normally on a council document being advertised, you'd have the council's own aims and objectives, and it's quotes from the scheme like that are in here. The very good one, 21.022, activity centres. Medical uses have emerged around Wang, public and private hospitals, creating potential amenity conflicts, etc., which is absolutely true. But we didn't have that there. We had Simon J. Bain, that's SJB Town Planners. We had his corporate objectives. So perhaps from a study he'd done for another hospital or another precinct in Subiaco or Richmond or South Yarra. So the people seeing that online weren't seeing it as a Wangaratta document that had come to council and it had some level of adoption and scrutiny by council, and it was put out under a private contractors with their objectives. So why would that be allowed? And thirdly, when you undertake a structure plan, it is by very nature strategic. And when you go to general comments on page 25, the structure plan is not strategic. So the only interpretation you can make it is not in the long term, that it's a short term thing until we get at some future date, some big greenfields hospital perhaps. So it's good, but it is strategic in the short term. And it doesn't, when you look at its results, it doesn't avoid the land use conflict between the beautiful residential precinct that it is and the burgeoning need for more land and floor space and parking for health and related needs. So it doesn't seem to have solved the problem, because it's gone in with a predetermination that we'll only look at this area, and then it comes out, when you look at the map there are things, a transition zone or some sort of zone where council presumably is going to look favourably on development applications to turn houses into medical premises. And when you look at those, there's some of the most significant heritage houses in Wangaratta in that area. So instead of saying, well, look, the hospital's moved westerly in the last 20 years, you know, with the resumption of part of Dixon Street, the closure of Dixon Street, most of the hospital's own expansion has been in a westerly direction, while there has been doctors' rooms, podiatrists galore on the north, south and the east side. So yes, more strategic direction you would have thought would have been to say, well, look, It's much better to go, say, south and west perhaps, but they didn't do that. They've got zones of interface where red brick, beautiful, some of Wangaratta's most beautiful houses are now got a fatwa on them because anyone that applies to turn them into some sort of hospital rooms is going to get approval. So just those three questions I'd like to have answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Stephen?
Thank you for those three questions. I think that were probably a few more than three, but I'll stick with the three. In terms of the boundaries of the study area and how those were determined, we started with a predefined area, and you're quite right in saying that. Through consultation with stakeholders, we at some early stage in the process decided to adjust those boundaries, so that was definitely flexible, and we did respond to a bit of an analysis to determine what is the right study area. We also have to consider that a lot of other work, strategic planning work, has gone into other areas such as the CBD and the central activities area. And part of the challenge with this work was to make sure that we link this piece of work with that. So in terms of connectivity with the CBD, this plan talks quite a bit about how we could connect this precinct over the railway line with the CBD. So it recognises the very strong link between the health precinct and the CBD and the central activities area. It does not rule out the fact that medical types uses might actually take place in other areas, but it does say that in this precinct we want to encourage those medical uses, and they take many different forms. So they are not just large medical development. Some of them are suited to the redevelopment of existing houses at a small scale, and that already occurs in this precinct. So it is about providing a bit of stronger guidance in that space. In terms of objectives and quotes from council scheme, the precinct structure plan actually does have that in place. If you go through to page 15, for instance, starting on page 14, it goes through all the parts of the existing planning scheme that applies to this precinct, including local policy, state policy, and it also goes on to talk about other plans and strategies that are in place and should be looked at. So from that perspective, council's objectives are very strongly articulated in this document. The third question, if I understood you correctly, refers to a comment on page 25 of the council report, which is under general comments, which says the structure plan is not strategic in its vision. That refers to a submission we received from somebody saying that they didn't feel like the structure plan goes far enough in terms of being strategic in its vision. A response to that submission is available in attachment 1. That submission goes on to explain what they mean by that, and what they are saying is that they believe that we should identify a greenfield site for a health precinct and develop a new hospital on that greenfield site. We didn't think that that was a realistic potential for us in the short term, and therefore we focused on providing strong guidance and objectives for the future development of this precinct. In terms of your comment about the plan does not avoid land use conflict, the plan, even though it tries to address the potential land use conflicts that can occur between, let's say, medical centres and residential uses, it will never be able to avoid those types of conflicts in itself. So it does include some guidance and some objectives around how we might manage that into the future. And that's all I had down, so hopefully I covered your questions. If not, I'm happy to keep going.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any other comments from the gallery there? Yes, Jude.
Already on. I have a question in relation to bringing specific specialist medical people like immunologists, oncology, which because people have to go either to North East Health for minor stuff, but actually have to access Wodonga or Melbourne for oncology. Immunology is the same. And if a person doesn't have a car, the only available means is to pay to get down to Melbourne. There's no free service for travel to Melbourne if you're disabled because of your because of your condition, because you can't drive that far. I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about other members of the community. So my question is about, are we able as a council and a community to try and effectively influence specialists to move to the country areas instead of being maintained in Melbourne because of the hospitals that are in Melbourne that they have to link up with, that sort of thing, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Good question. And I, just to butt in on probably Jamie and Stephen on this one too, by increasing our footprint here of our medical precinct plan, this will allow this style of development to happen more easily. That if there are specialist doctors that want to come and set up their organisations here, we've already got the areas available for them to come and do it either on a small scale or an extremely large scale. So this is a very important part of this this process. Any further comment there, Stephen?
I was going to say something very similar. This plan focuses on land use and development in that area, but it also sends a strong message that we actually do have a plan for our medical precinct. So if somebody wants to actually come in and move to Wangaratta and develop a medical centre or want to use an existing building for a medical centre, this plan provides them with a bit of information about what's council's plan for that area. In terms of encouraging people to or specialists to come to Wangaratta specifically, I'm not really sure if we can do much about that, but that certainly is something that advocacy comes to mind, that we need to continue in that space.
Correct. Thank you, Stephen. I'll get Brendan to talk on that one shortly, but Councillor Fuller.
I just wanted to follow that up. We are actually going to be doing that advocacy. That's the point of the branding and marketing strategies, to attract those type people, to attract trailblazers is one of our things that we have in there. And it's about promoting ourselves as being a great place to live, but also a great place to work. So that's part of the marketing and branding strategy.
Thank you, Brendan.
Just a brief comment from me, Mr Mayor. I just acknowledge that we have a wonderful health service at the hospital at North East Health, led by Marg Bennett and a very capable team. So I'd certainly be guided by Marg and her team on what was possible in terms of attracting those services. I guess what we tend to see over time is a gradual improvement to services in the region. You look at the improvement at Albury Wodonga Health and some of the cardiology and oncology services that are now available up there that weren't previously available, and hopefully that's a trend that will continue. I wouldn't want to comment too specifically on what services we ought to be encouraging to come to Wangaratta without getting some more specialist input from Marg and her team about what is actually achievable and deliverable, but I'm certainly happy during one of our regular conversations with Marg and her chair to raise that as an issue, and if the council can help prosecute an argument that they think they can actually deliver given appropriate funding, then we're very happy to do that.
Thank you, Brendan. And also, Judy, we hopefully in the future have a more reliable train service that can get us to these specialists, whether in Albury or Melbourne, at a more affordable, faster and super reliable in one day down and back. But that's coming hopefully in the next couple of years.
Can I just quickly add to that?
Yes.
Albury Wodonga Health do not have accommodation access for people that have to travel. So family members have to constantly travel backwards and forwards daily. Whereas Melbourne do have accommodations. They actually have a motel within the hospital. I know this because I've accessed it, and I've told people how to access it through social workers and other things like that. So to build a health precinct in Wangaratta, we also need to consider the families that are travelling, say from Corriol. They don't want to have to be travelling here to access health facilities and have to drive all the way back to Corriol on a constant day-to-day basis to see their loved ones.
Maybe that's the thing we should be advocating for too, for accommodation. Thank you, Judy. Good comment.
Thank you.
Stephen?
Yeah, just to add to that, when you look at the health precinct structure plan, it's not all about health facilities either. It does recognise the fact that we need a mix of different land uses out there, and accommodation specifically mentioned in there in that context. So we need accommodation there for people that are coming in from other areas of the region. That recognises that the hospital services a wider catchment, and I think the number mentioned in the plan is that it services a catchment of about 90,000 people across the region.
Thank you, Stephen. If there's no more questions, we'll I'll look for a mover, Councillor Fuller, and a seconder, Councillor Clark. Are there any comments further, Councillor Fuller?
I just wanted to acknowledge further to what Brendan was saying about Mark Bennett and her team, the board that work with the hospital. It's one of our biggest employees. It's a vital part of our network, and it's a great reason to live here because we do have such a great facility. So it's important to work with them, the other stakeholders, and this will work towards that.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Any other comments? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just comment in relation to this health precinct plan. This health precinct plan started back in January of 2018, if I'm correct. So it just hasn't been thought up in the last few months and thought we'll expand the boundaries and just put a rubber stamp on it. It's had a lot of community consultation, employer consultation, and the health industry consultation. We've held information sessions, etc. about this and spoken to residents in that area. Our hospital is our biggest employer by a mile, let alone all the outshoots or offshoots from the hospital that get employed around Wangaratta. We feel that there's a need for it here in Wangaratta. This will grow Wangaratta. So by including this and having this room for this expansion of our medical industry, and as Stephen said, it's not just about having a specialist here and a specialist there. That's super inclusive, we need, but the accommodation, as Judy was mentioning there before, is a huge situation where if we can have that, get the people to come to Wangaratta, they come and do that, they enjoy the benefits that Wangaratta has to offer. So this is a fantastic thing for Wangaratta, and a credit to our planning team and our strategic planning. And strategic planning, everybody thinks is for the future, which it is, but our short-term strategic planning isn't 2 years. This is still going to accomplish over the next 20 to 30 years here. Talking of a greenfield hospital site sounds like a fantastic thing, but this might be 50 plus years away. So we need to look after what we have now. So thank you, Stephen and your team, for the great work. So I'll put the motion to a vote if there's no further comment. David, want to finish off? No. All those in favour of continuing this motion? The motion is granted. Special committee reports. Thank you, Brendan. 19.1.
Thanks, Chair. 19.1 deals with both assemblies of councillors that have happened since the last meeting and also minutes of our advisory committee reports, and recommends that we receive those assemblies of councillors and note the minutes of those advisory committees.
Any questions from the gallery on these? No, thank you. Can I have a mover on these? Councillor Fitzpatrick, Councillor Bussell. No comments, councillors. Put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. No notice of business. Urgent business.
Fell asleep then. I'd just like to put a motion to standing order so we have an opportunity to go and discuss the time that we start at our next ordinary meeting.
So you'll, Councillor Curry to move that motion and Councillor Fuller to second that. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Will excuse us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in about 4 minutes. We'll just discuss this. Thank you.
It's the state government board. Oh, it's only a recommendation. That's the minimum. It's 121. So we get these very well educated, making mistakes. They expect the visitors to say, oh yeah, they've been to university. Well, I've been to university. But I'll bet you. Then we could be. And for council in relation to how it runs the council, it's no different. It was just a bit larger. Running their books is no different to running my house. It's just a bit larger. Running my road was like a symphony. The first fake came in at 2 o'clock and made the dough, and he was the kettle drum guy that night. And then they all come down. No, really. That's right. We got a question from the council.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, they're not back. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. We'll continue on. Councillor Curry.
Just like to move a motion to resume standing orders.
Seconded by Councillor Fuller. All those in favour? The motion is carried. We'll move forward. Councillor Clark.
I'd like to move that the meeting for the August the 20th be rescheduled from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Fitzpatrick. I'll just go to the gallery. Any questions from the gallery on the meeting moving from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m? No? Councillors, anyone like to talk on this? Councillor Curry?
Just like to note that, you know, we have talked and we've listened to what you said. We'll give everybody an opportunity to get here from working hours, make sure that it's 6. But obviously it's a limited communication. If you can get out there and let people know that we have changed it, it'd be much appreciated.
Thank you. As one of the people said, if someone turns up at 3, we can tell them to come back at 6. Can't do it the other way around. So, any other comments? No? All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. The next meeting will be at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 20th of August. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to the draw at the end of our meeting here tonight, so we'll go to public question time. And as I said before, I'm happy to take 2 questions from any individual. I will state that this is public question time, not public statement time. So if you have a statement that you would like to make to a councillor or the mayor or any of the staff, please come and see us at the end of the meeting. But if you have a question from the gallery, if you'd like to ask the question of an individual councillor or a corporate management team member, please come forward now. Yes, sir. Just state your name, sir, even though I know who you are, but just so everyone else does.
Bill Dawn, Moyu Action Group. Taking in account of the King Valley's importance to tourism in the rural city of Wangaratta, with currently in excess of 150,000 visitors according to the Tourism Northeast, be anticipated to increase to 230,000 by 2022. In other words, in 3 years, we're going to have a vast increase of that number of 80,000 visitors. Much of the proposed marketing budget is aimed at attracting visitors to the King Valley. And what is Council doing to enable the development of infrastructure needed to support the growing numbers?
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for the question, Bill. Through the chair, it's a really good question. As part of the presentations that we've been doing on the marketing and branding strategy, one of the things we've acknowledged is that we need to approach this problem from multiple directions, and there's a lot of pre-planning work that needs to be done. We need areas for houses, we need to be working with industry to make sure there's jobs, we need to be working with education providers to make sure there's appropriate courses running, etc., etc. On the King Valley specifically, I guess there's a few things I'd mention. We meet regularly with Vic Roads, and we recently convened a meeting out in the King Valley with the new regional director of Vic Roads to talk about a range of things, largely relating to tourism and the traffic on that road and the condition of the road and safety for bicycles. So those are issues that we'll continue to advocate with Vic Roads to make sure that the main road in and out is appropriate. We're doing a township development plan for Whitfield, which is obviously one of the key townships in the King Valley. That'll look at a whole range of infrastructure and development related issues to give us some sense of what the priority is for improvements and the growth and development of that town. And we have regular discussions with some of the key business owners out there, both from an agriculture perspective and a winery tourism perspective, about what are the longer term plans that are required for things like short stay accommodation for visitors, hotels, those sorts of things. So there's a range of things underway and a range of things we're having conversations about, but your overarching point that everything needs to cater for that growth is a really good one.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions from the gallery? Anne, please come forward.
Anne Johnson at Tarawinji. In relation to, there's a lot of very new, keen, interested people trying to follow the council information. Is it possible that through your Facebook pages and media releases that you could make sure that people are aware that the agendas are available the Friday afternoon before a council meeting? The current theme that I'm hearing in the gallery from the last two meetings is that they are unaware that the agendas are available so early, and they are surprised when they attend council meetings and there's only 5 copies available, when if they were to go to reception, that they are available from reception, or you can request them to be printed also. So is it possible to make that a little bit clearer?
Good comment. We'll talk to our media advisor Stephen Burke here at council to make sure he gets on the platforms and tells people in relation to that. Ash?
Thanks, and I know that personally I put it on my council Facebook page, and also at the end of the meetings as well, when the minutes are uploaded, I also attach that on my page for the community as well. So there are those options too. Perfect, thank you.
Not everyone has a computer or Facebook.
Facebook's going to be closed down.
Sorry, no?
Through the Chronicle, if that's possible, in your weekly write-up, that you make people aware possibly?
Yeah, that's a good idea too.
Listen, I agree in the fact that with the age demographic that the town's looking at, we really need to have a look at how we are actually going to present this sort of moving forward. And I agree there probably should be more copies available on the night. And maybe we just need a better system in actually doing it, because the other flip of the coin is we don't want to waste paper either and be seen as just being disposable sort of organisation. So we try and do it via soft copy where we can, but I'm pretty sure the girls, and maybe we print out a limited number and we just turn around and say if there's none left, we'll print some more on the night.
And
my response to that is if you're receiving the agenda, the night of the meeting will mean at 10 to 6, you haven't got enough time to digest the information in the agenda to make valid comments.
Probably a true account. Before we go on, Mr. Fox, Alan, have you got an answer? Judy, your question from early on in the night in relation to the footpath, etc. Just footpaths, etc. I just wanted Alan to comment further on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Judy. We're well aware of the roads that don't have footpaths. We have them all documented, and we have a plan which essentially says we want to have footpaths down at least one side of every road. We're working through that list, but the reality is it takes a long time, and it's mainly in those older areas that don't have the footpaths. We've done a lot of work in those areas the last 4 or 5 years, but we've got a long way to go. So we're not going to get there in the next few years, but we're chewing away. All the new areas, of course, get the footpaths as part of the development, so it is just those old areas that we're trying to catch up with.
Yes, Bernard.
Templeton Street, no guttering, then from what's it, Green Street along in front of the
Still got the open spoon Jones there, or swale drains.
That's right, yeah, and also the no footpaths. What's the street off Garland Avenue that runs down to?
Past the West End School,
yeah.
Donald Street.
Yeah, there's no footpaths there, and I saw a fella really clobbered one day. He was in a mobility scooter. He goes to go around a parked car, another car comes around the corner and nearly skittled him.
Yeah, but again, those older areas, as Alan was talking about before, that are on our list and hopefully will get done over the years, but yeah.
Yeah, and this woman pushes, like, say it's a grandchild to school in a chair, and she's got to get him to school, and there's no footpaths for push.
For pushes.
Mm.
No, thank you. Oh, just before you go there, Brian, you had your hand up there before.
Is this the public question time?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if we look at the third dot from the bottom of the construction sheet, we see, please be respectful, which I always try to be, considered and clear in your question, which I always try to be, and we promise to do the same. I'm delighted with that. This evening, I suggested that if my donuts got 60% acceptance rate, I'd close the bakery while I found out what I was doing wrong. Councillor Curry came forward telling me that running a bakery was nothing like running the council. Well, I'd like to inform you, Councillor Curry, that there is no difference between running the council and running my bakery. I had 30 employees, two vans. The first guy started at 2 o'clock in the morning and the last cleaner went home at 7 o'clock at night. And it was like running a symphony orchestra, getting all things together. So I say thank you, and I don't need a reply. I just want to say that that what you say here is treating me with respect. The second thing I want to take up with Jamie Carroll.
Mr. Fox, is it a question?
Yeah.
You've got a question for Jamie?
Yes.
Right.
I want to know that if she was walking up the street with a stick with a little ball on the end of it,
yes,
to try to find her way, wouldn't she be far better to go up the middle of the footpath rather than running along the building line, because you've got customers coming in and out, you've got staff going servicing the customers. There is more danger of you being tripped up by what we've got than what we had before, and I'm asking you to repeat. Are you happy?
So I don't have a visual impairment, despite my glasses.
You don't have
a visual impairment that would limit. So my happiness is only able to be given on someone who can walk the street without that kind of boundaries. I understand that. So hypothetically, my understanding of it is that the boundary of the wall is not just a visual guide, it's also there, and the stick allows people to tap against the wall to use it as guidance. So having a stick or a cane and using it as guidance is nowhere near as useful when there's not something to be able to use to provide that kind of guidance as a solid wall does. But I am absolutely saying that without ever having been in the experience of needing it. So what we do as a council is our objective is to make all of our communities, but most particularly our CBD, as accessible for everybody. And whilst there may only be a small proportion of people who have the level of visual impairment that needs that kind of guidance or is reliant on a cane, it is absolutely vital that they can navigate our CBD with confidence and safety, and that's why these kinds of rules are in place. And yes, those visual guides and the capacity to tap against the walls are very important.
What happens when they come to the doorway? There's no wall. Anyway,
just one note. I'll get Alan Clark. Could you comment on this, Alan?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Brian, what we're talking about here, and Councillor Clark mentioned he thought it was I think you said Commonwealth law, and what we're guided by is Australian standards. So our local law is informed by the Australian standard, which says that space should be there and people with visual disability should be able to use the building line to help them around, in this case the CBD. So we're compliant with the Australian standard, and Australian standards are treated as the law in the courts if there's no overriding law. It also becomes important for people's insurances. If people ignore those Australian standards and place something in that space, then the insurance companies have every right and have in other parts of the country refuse to insure that business. So what we're doing is in accordance with the law of the land. It's not our idea, it's not even Victoria's idea, but it's a Commonwealth idea.
I thank you, Alan, for that. I won't remind you of the times you've told me about the law, and when I've gone and looked up the Local Government Act, it is not a fact. I will be looking up the Local Government Act in the morning to see if I can find a rule that says we've got to put the displays in the middle of the footpath. And if you can find the one that supports your theory, I will be delighted to get an email.
Brian, look at the Australian standards. Don't look at the Local Government Act, look at the Australian standards.
Is Queensland in Australia? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just want to support what Councillor Clark. I think I had a reproach from at least, I think 4 or 5 businesses in Murphy Street when I became a councillor, and after my investigations and reading it is a federal discrimination act, and if any person puts those materials up against even if it's in Queensland, they are breaking the law. And you will remind yourself that there was a senator had his wife knocked over coming out of a building, and he tried to get it changed and he didn't get it changed. And it is a federal criminal act if you have your merchandise up against the wall of the shop. Doesn't matter whether you're in Western Australia, Queensland, Victoria or wherever. It's not a government, local, state law, it's a federal law. So if you've got any real bites about it, our local member is Heather Haynes, Dr. Haynes.
And I'd like to pass comment to, not in relation to the footpath matter, but in relation to Councillor Curry. I too run a private business and currently do, and a couple of them. And it's nothing like running council, I can tell you that. I wish it was. It would make the job here at council a lot easier, but it is, we are governed by different matters to what we are governed in private business. So I'm in support of Councillor Curry's comments in relation to that. Thank you. Are there any further comments or any further questions? Sorry, no comments from the gallery. Yes, sir, again. Second question you've got. Thanks, Bill.
At this time is a micro question. As a resident of Coringle Park Lane, I congratulate Council for the reshedding of Coringle Park Lane. However, I wonder, because it was done by a contractor, as to whether there was sufficient council supervision. I don't know if anybody's been down that road since it's been done. It's over a fortnight since it's been completed. However, the sides of the road are quite dangerous. And just for instance, entrance to our property, I have about a 150, 200 mil drop off the road to our gateway. And I just sort of feel the job has not been finished.
Thanks, Bill. I'll hand that over to Alan, and he might pop out and have a look at some stage. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Bill. We'll need to get out and have a look, so we'll see what we can do.
Thanks, Alan. If there's no further questions, then ladies and gentlemen, we'll call the meeting to an end at 7:14. And thank you very much for your attendance. Have a great evening. Look forward to seeing you next month. Bye-bye.